Hello, welcome to another World of Warships Destroyer inspection. We are looking at the Holland, not Erling the good one, Holland in the game. Why am I always hating on the Holland? Is it because it has shitty guns? No, it's not. DPM is quite good. Shell arcs are okay. Is it because it has shitty torps? Uh, Not really either. The torps are quite decent on Holland. Is it because it has bad AA? No, it's got pretty good AA for a destroyer. Why do I hate this ship? Well, I hate this ship because you are a less maneuverable version of Daring with no smoke. That's it. That's legitimately it. That's my entire issue with the boat. It's why it's not nearly as survivable as the HP plus heals would suggest. It's why, despite the fact that you should build it for guns, it's an awkward gunboat. Um, the Holland to me has so much bait uh, built into it. The torps are extremely bad for a torpedo boat, which is why to me the Holland is a gunboat. But as a gunboat, you have no real kind of survivability at all, even including the heals. Something like gun spec Yu Yang, I would argue, is much more survivable. Radar gun spec Yu Yang is just like straight up a way better thing. So the question is, if you are a boat with decent guns and okay torps that has no smoke, what do you have going for you? Well, very interesting situation we see here. And this is going to lead us into a discussion about why the torps are very mediocre. Uh, they don't really do any damage. And not only do the torps not really do any damage, but the Holland as a torpedo boat is a fundamentally, in my opinion, flawed concept. The Holland torps are almost inarguably worse than a ship that everyone in this community would unanimously agree you exclusively build for guns. We're going to use Rigolo and Alvaro de Bazan as examples because they have the same kind of torps. Um, well, number one, uh, the torpedo DPM on the Holland is some of the worst in the game. In fact, it's barely better than Vampire 2 that gets one rack of torpedoes. Okay? Now, torpedo DPM is not the end-all be-all of torpedoes. Obviously, what we really care about, do the torps hit things? So that would be down to speed and concealment. Holland is very mediocre. Holland has about the same likelihood of any given torp hitting something as gearing. The reaction time is almost identical. And then we care about Alpha Strike, which Holland has like one of the worst Alpha Strike torps in the game. Basically, these 10 torpedoes have like barely more Alpha Strike than, again, Vamp 2's 5 torpedoes, right? And, we have another situation here of someone just botting out, but again, requiring 4 torpedo hits. And I want you to see here, we have 8 torpedoes hit for 3 floodings. And that is also another issue. So what makes torps good? What makes a good torpedo good in World of Warships? Likelihood to hit, which is down to speed combined with concealment and the spread and the torpedo count. Ability to grief damage control, that would be the flooding percent chance. Alpha Strike, that would be the ability to, one-shot things. And then we have a category that I like to call spammability, which would involve long-range torpedoes with a decent reload. Holland's torps are quite spammable. Very, very good range of 15 kilometers. Excellent range of 15 kilometers. Decent reload, 100-second base reload. Okay, so they've met one criteria for what I would consider decent torpedoes to be. How about hitability? Very, very average. Right around, again, right around exactly like middle of the pack. Gearing, daring, all of these normal ships, like even, Marceau is very close in reaction time. They're in the high 7s reaction time for seconds. So hitability is, okay. And then Alpha Strike is dog shit. Torpedo DPM is in fact dog shit. So let's just compare the Holland torpedoes really quick. to Alvaro de Bazan torpedoes or Regolo torpedoes because they have the same torpedoes? Well, Holland has less torpedo DPM. Holland has less alpha strike. Holland has less damage control griefing because the flood chance is much, much worse. Holland has less reload. They go 1.5 kilometers farther, but they reload in 10 seconds longer. Holland's torps are obviously much, much faster. Despite that, they have over 2 seconds more reaction time than Alvaro de Bazan and Regolo torps. So my question to you is, if you're building Holland for torpedoes, why are you doing that, and why are you not building something like Alvaro de Bazan or Regolo for torpedoes? So this is what we are always talking about. When we talk about what to build into, and the Holland, on paper is a very 50-50. That's why I say this ship has noob bait torpedoes. They have these super fast, super long range torpedoes with a good reload. They're ultimate noob bait, basically. So you're very incentivized to build in for them. So you take something like Fill the Tubes. You spend 3 captain points to still not have the torpedo DPM of Regolo and Alvaro de Bazan. And then let's say you take the 15% reload in slot 6 on your equipment build. Then you barely have more torpedo DPM. You have about 10% now more torpedo DPM than Alvaro de Bazan and Regolo. And then you are doing all of this at the cost of nerfing what to me is the main reason to play the ship, which is the very, very respectable DPM. Extremely respectable DPM on the Holland. The base DPM is about 210k. So you have daring DPM. You have almost the fire starting of daring. It's very, very close to daring fire starting. There you see, again, 3 torps, 2 floods. It's very okay flood chance, right? But you have this quite excellent DPM. And so there are a couple of problems with Holland, is how do you utilize the DPM? Because you are slow and you are big, and you don't, unlike daring, have improved acceleration, which makes daring much more able to dodge things than something like Holland, and you don't have the smoke. So you have to get this damage open water. You have to be spotted basically all the time you're getting damage with your guns, and the torpedoes are just not reliable. So you kind of have to go what we would call a full gun spec on Holland, because just going for more DPM on the Holland does not work. You have to buff the range. You have to take range mod on the captain, or you basically have no ability to fight really anything. You're one of the easiest destroyers in the game to hit. You're pretty much inarguably the easiest destroyer that doesn't have a smoke to hit in the game. We have other big giant boats that farm open water like Ragnar. Ragnar has a 30% speed boost that it can use. Ragnar has way more range, right? 2.5 kilometers more base range on something like Ragnar. It's got, 8,000 more HP kind of a thing. So the Holland is just in a very peculiar spot. And the reason why I rag on it so much is that it's just, to me, an example of extremely conflicting game design. Wargaming decided that this ship would have incredibly just very, very solid DPM and pretty solid shell arcs as well. You don't have anything like railgun shell arcs or anything like that, but the flight time to any given range is just about on par, and it actually sometimes, at closer ranges, medium range, it's actually better than daring. Daring shells, contain their velocity a bit farther, but inside 10 kilometers, you have a couple tenths of a second better flight time than daring. Like I said, you basically have almost the same fire starting as the daring. Also, you have slightly more pen. You have 20 mil pen. That's another thing we can talk about. The Holland has 20 millimeters of pen. So if you fight something like a Gearing, you see the enemy team had a Gearing, which is a very common destroyer. We mentioned this in the Gearing video. About 25-30% of Gearing's hull, you do not penetrate with HE on the Holland. You just don't. So that is another big issue. Now, you also, crucially though, you don't fuse on 19 millimeters of armor. So you're in the with your AP. So you're in the perfectly horrific center of both bad outcomes in the Holland, where You don't fuse on flat broadside destroyers, like almost any of them, with your AP. But then you don't pen HE on 21 millimeters. And 21 millimeters is not an ultra rare armor type. There's some ultra light cruisers that have 21 in certain places, right? Things like Gearing have 21. Um, so this, we hit a bunch of torps in Holland, right? You saw us hit a ton of torpedoes, right? A ton of torpedoes. 80,000 torpedoes, damage. We launched 40, we hit 11. Fairly decent. The problem is that kind of any other ship, we would have done more torpedo damage. We just would have. The two dev strikes, those are bots. They would have hit any torps in the game most likely. There's no comparison there. But then something like that Montana, if those were, Alvaro torps taking Liquidator, for example, that would have been an extra, 5 to 10,000 damage and an extra flood on that guy, right? And the torpedoes are spammable. And this, did want to show this replay because this is like unicorn Holland game where like people randomly sprint and gray line in torpedoes. This kind of game like almost never happens. You typically have to get the vast majority of your damage in the Holland with the guns. And the problem also with trying to play the Holland as a stealth torpedo boat is you can't really run away from anything. Shima is quite fast. It's quite low in the water. It's quite slim. It has a smoke to disengage with. Shima has very good concealment. Shima can very, very easily run away. If you are pushing in the Holland and you run into any destroyer that beats you in a gunfight, you are not getting away. Period. Full stop. There's no destroyer really in the game that is so slow it cannot stay within 6 kilometers of Holland if it wants to. And this is the problem with building for Torp spec. If you build fully for guns, you take Reload, you take Fearless Brawl, you all of a sudden have quite competitive DPM around 260,000 HE DPM. And you do have the heal, so while running away, you can make people suffer for pushing into you. The second you decide to forego guns on the Holland and build exclusively for torpedoes, you now do not have anything approaching deterrence, and you're stuck on this 210,000 HE DPM. Then you all of a sudden don't really have deterrence damage output, and like pretty much everything can run into you. But we hit 11 torpedoes, right? We hit 11 torpedoes for 80,000 damage. And again, I want to stress this is unicorn situation because 8 of those 11 torpedoes were on ships with virtually zero, right? Virtually zero torpedo protection of any kind, right? I mean, the destroyer has obviously none, and then the cruiser has like maybe 30%, maybe. I think it's probably lower than that. It's probably like 15%. So we're hitting 8 of these 11 torpedoes on targets with 0 torpedo protection, effectively, and we're still only getting 80,000 damage, and we're getting 5 floods with 11 torpedo hits, right? So this is the problem. Yes, the torps are spammable. Yes, they're easy to use, but they don't reliably cause floodings, which then lets you set consistent permanent fires, because again, you have really good fire starting on the Holland. So like better fire starting than I want to say even these other ships that we've compared it to, like Regolo. I believe, I'm pretty positive that the Holland has better fire starting than something like Regolo by a good bit. Again, we're almost at daring fire starting. So what we want to do ideally in a boat with good fire starting, a destroyer, is we want to send out torps. When the torps hit and flood, and they damage con, because you almost kind of have to damage con even just one flood in most situations in your battleship and cruiser. Then we open up with this very excellent, with the build, we're probably at something like 12 fires per minute, which is very good. But then the problem is you can't rely on one torpedo to get you a flood. You can't even really rely on 2 torpedoes to get you a flood. Probably half the time you hit 2 torps on a target on a battleship, you just don't get a flood. And this is very different than, of course, even again, something like Regolo, where you just have an extra point on your captain, you slap it on flood chance, and all of a sudden Regolo has like 300% flood chance. You slap Liquidator on Holland, You're at like 230% flood chance with it. It's weird how flood chance in this game works. I personally despise how fire and flood chance works in this game, but basically what you need to know is like you kind of want to be as close to 400% flood chance with torpedoes. 400% flood chance is kind of like where it's basically guaranteed a hit is a flood, basically guaranteed. So like when you're at even with Liquidator on Holland, and you're at again, it's something like I think the base flood chance on this is like 175%. So buffing that by zero point 0.3, we're up to somewhere around like 225% flood chance, which realistically is not even quite half. And that's borne out in this replay. That's borne out in the real world data in this very replay. You want to be as close to 400% as you can get to basically guarantee that like 80+% of the time you get single torpedoes, you get a flood. You can't. Even if you build for flood chance in Holland, the best you're going to do is 2 torpedoes has like a 50-50 chance of getting you a flood. And again, we've gone over these torps aren't any more likely to hit a given target. If a target is in your torpedo spread, these torps are dead average. They're gearing torps, they're Marceau torps, they're anything like this. They're nothing close to as good as, again, Rigolo, Alvaro de Bazan torpedoes that have much, much better stealth. Like, 0 speed build on Rigolo torps blows Holland reaction time out of the water with a full build for speed on Holland torps, right? So, that is the situation. Now, there are certain situations where the torps are unironically very, very good and better than what I've been describing so far. And those situations are mostly what I am going to summarize as turnout torpedoing and gap torping, right? So, turnout torping. A battleship, a cruiser, whatever, is pushing roughly nose in, right? Maybe at an angle. And they're in a bad situation, so you know they want to leave. And they're going to start turning out. The problem is you cannot torp the gray line because they're actively turning. And you cannot torp the gray line after they start to turn, because then they're unpredictable again. Do they keep you turning? Do they turn back in, right? So you notice a turn is happening, and you need to torp predictively, not using the gray line where they're going to be broadside when they make that turn. Holland torps are amazing at this because you have the speed to do this. 8-10 kilometers even, a battleship starts turning out. You guess where they're going to turn. You spam the torps. You stack them side by side. You're basically guaranteed to get a torpedo hit. Whereas slower torps, like we mentioned, these Rigolo Alvaro torps, right? They don't really have the speed to do that. Okay, so that's use case 1 where Holland torps are amazing. Use case 2 where Holland torps are amazing is on gap torping. So there's 2 islands and a ship is going to cross the islands. And so he leaves island A, maybe on your left, and you spot him. And you know he's going to island B. There's a lot of torps that are just too slow to catch people. Like you see these 2 islands here, over here where my cursor is on the minimap. Let's say a ship, I was middle of the cap and a ship got spotted on this island and started accelerating to cross this gap. Like most torps just simply wouldn't even have the speed at 7-8 kilometers to fill that gap and catch him in time, right? Use case 2 where Holland torps are really, really good. Despite the dog shit damage, dog shit flooding, etc. They're really good because you're going to get hits you wouldn't hit with most other torpedoes. And then case number 3 is people who are parked nose in, and that is because you have the super narrow spread on Holland torps. Like the nutty narrow spread on these torps, which I will say is 90% of the time horrible, okay? 90% of the time it is horrible, and it is bait, and you shouldn't use it. But there are fringe situations, right, where it is amazing. Holland has the 3-degree skinny torp spread and the 6-degree wide torp spread. Most destroyers have about a 4-8, like 4, 8, and 6 kilometers or 6 degrees are very common skinny spreads. Like again, we're talking Rigolo, Z, Alvaro, things like that. And then you have ships like, Shima, the Elbing and stuff that have 6 kilometer, I keep saying kilometer, degree torps. Holland is super narrow spread. They have 3 kilometer, Jesus Christ, man. 3 degree and 6 degree torp spreads. The 3 degrees torp spread is almost always horrible. We can also talk about multiple reasons why. Obviously, one, you're increasing how precise your torpedoes have to be, which is typically a mistake. Now here, this club is making a giant mistake. He's turning in, and that's why I'm opening it up right now. If you watch the Kleber video, you know the one thing I said you have to think about is how bad the DPM is. So I waited till the torps were close, because a desirable thing for Kleber players to do is to, of course, slow down to speed juke shells. So I'm going to guarantee one of two things. He gray lines, and I can easily lead him, or he slows down and hits a torp. And his guns were the wrong way. And you see how respectable this damage output is. We didn't really get to use the guns a whole lot the last game. Like something like a Kleber without its reload booster, you're going to shit on that. You know, Shima, you're going to shit on that, right? You're going to shit on a lot of destroyers that don't have high base DPM, as long as you're close enough where the shell arcs are not a problem. But back to the torpedoes. Also, not only are you making how precise you have to be more problematic, but importantly, torpedo saturation. Hitting 5 of these torpedoes on the same like 50-foot section of somebody's hull is a guaranteed way to cuck the damage even more than this horrific damage is already cucked by nature of the torpedoes themselves. You know, basically, you know, even when YOLOing people, that's another problem the torps have. Obviously, you have no alpha strikes, so you like basically can't take down any even like 2/3 HP battleship in the game. But those are the situations, right? Predicting torpedo turnout, spamming predictive torps for turnouts. Holland is awesome because of, and the reason why I'm widespreading here is the carcass. I wasn't sure if that guy's body would block the torp, so I am going to narrow spread here, but most of the time I'm not narrow spreading. But the narrow spread is undeniably great when you've got something like a Moskva, Petro, Stalingrad, Kremlin, or something who's just parked bow in. And a lot of times with Shima's torp spread, which, you know, the best it can get is like double what Holland's torp spread is, there's times where just torpedo spread RNG. So you see here, I barely missed him. But how badly would those torps have missed if they were like 70 knot Shima torps, 70 knot gearing torps, right? That's the point that I'm getting at with torping gaps on people, even though we didn't hit one. You see how close that was. If this Massachusetts had, frankly, been a more intelligent player, he actually would have been more likely to hit one. But so, you know, the fire starting. Like, this is my point back to the torpedoes that can't be relied on to flood people. Because the fire starting is so respectable on the Holland, it's extra griefing that the torpedoes have horrible flood chance, because you're so good at starting permanent fires. If people have DCP down, you start them so consistently, so quickly. Again, very, very on par with Daring. Honestly, basically exactly on par with Daring, because Daring typically will just never be running Fearless Brawl, right? Because there's better things to take on Daring. Holland, you're a slave to open water. So, and the shell arcs, like you said, like I've said, are basically identical to Daring. So it's not that hard to hit battleships, even at like 12 kilometers, right? Nowhere near like Yu Yang or Gearing Torp. So we got a double fire. So we probably killed this guy, right? Really nice. But you notice something. This Des Moines was able to hit me. I mean, he's a fan. Like, what the fuck he is doing, I do not know. He's a fan, but there's like no other open water gunboat that would take a shell from him in this situation, right? Now, this can lead us into the topic of Holland Legendary mod, I suppose, which I think is actually very good. If you are a Holland main for some clinically deranged reason, and specifically you run gun spec Holland, which I think even if you're a Holland main, like, you're crazy to run anything but gun spec Holland. I just don't think it makes any sense to bring your torpedo DPM from where it is, which is a dog shit like 65,000, to then buff that by like low 20s% with taking both the skill, like the captain skill and the module slot. Very interesting gameplay by my Shikishima, who ran around on a hard spotted Des Moines with his guns completely the wrong way, showed flat broadside to basically just get deleted by Des Moines AP. Very, very, very enlightening gameplay. As always, be learning. Make sure you're always learning when you play your random battles. Um, so, in something like a Kleber, a Marceau, um, honestly, even like Rigolo, Alvaro, we would like be hard bullying something like a Des Moines at the 12 to 13 kilometer range, right? We would just hard bully it. Um, Also, the AP DPM on Holland is quite excellent too because it has high base DPM. The AP is pretty okay. Flat side, juicy side platings like Shikishima is a perfect example of you definitely want to load the AP at like almost any range really. But so the Holland Legendary mod, the reason why I think it's so good is it heavily addresses the ultimate problem with Holland, and the ultimate problem with Holland is the survivability. We have another battleship on my team, red alert. We have another battleship on my team who went around a rock broadside to Des Moines AP with his guns the wrong way. Yeah, and this guy doesn't even shoot. Like, holy Jesus, these players! Battleship players, man! Battleship players! We've got to buff battleships. They're so weak. They're so weak, they can't even kill a Des Moines at 2 kilometers. Holy Jesus. But like at this range, I would never go dark here. Marceau, Kleber, Rigolo, like any of these ships that have like, because my speed boost is down. Look how slow I am. You're a fat fucking slow ass piggy in this thing. But yeah, the ledge mod does like heavily address the ultimate core issue with Holland, which is open water survivability, because it slightly improves your speed. It gives you about 3 extra knots of speed while the speed boost is up, crucially. It gives you a more efficient heal, so you heal 75% of penetration damage, which is kind of crazy. That's Conqueror's heal, right? That is Conqueror's heal. So, obviously not the amount of HP recovered, but the percent of pen damage recovered. And then you get a base charge. And a part of the issue with Holland is it's a very, very point-starved gunboat captain, because you legitimately just kind of cannot afford to take... you can't really afford to take consumables superintendent on this thing, because you have to take range on the captain. And so, like, you can take superintendent, but then you're giving up 10% DPM, right? Like, that's basically the math on Holland. But this guy, you saw what he was doing. He was kind of being semi-smart. He was trying to shoot me to bait me into a torpedo. Listen, dude, I was not fucking born yesterday. The second this guy shot at me, you saw me go nose in. There's exactly one reason Ashima would voluntarily open up on a Holland, unless he's retarded, and that is to bait me into a torpedo. So this is what I mean by the speed to catch people. This guy's broadside right now, right? Now, I want to stress, Rigolo, Alvaro, Daring Torps are all technically better in this situation, except for the fact that because the Torps are fast, it's very unlikely the Shimakaze will have a chance to angle in the smoke. I mean, you saw that he was still perfectly flat broadside. Like, it didn't even occur to him that I would smoke his Torp smoke at 3 kilometers because he's a Shimakaze player. But the point withstands that there's a lot of situations where the Torps can certainly catch targets that are not really accessible to you with Torps in that 50 to 70 knot range. But now the speed boost is going down. The Schlieffen is half HP. So kind of like in a Daring, and this is really my ultimate problem with the Holland. Back to the Ledge mod, I do think it's good. If you love Gunboat Holland, you think it's a good ship, you enjoy it. I do think, like, really you should get the Ledge mod. Like, if you like this boat, now if you play Torp spec Holland, I definitely do not think you should get the Legendary mod, because that would not really make any sense. But I don't think you should really play Torp spec Holland anyway. So we're going behind the rock. I'm going to get like 5-6 salvos off. And a nice little instantaneous fire, right? Pretty cool. Got like a quick, probably 5k damage on him. Got a fire, burned a DCP, right? Fire starting is great. DPM is great. The heal is nice to have. The problem is the heal is just not really making up for how easy this thing is to hit, and therefore how much damage it takes. Like, again, Torp spec or gun spec Yu Yang is just like, you get a radar. Um, the reason why something like Smalland is just so infinitely better than Holland as a gunboat is not even that the DPM is higher. Like, yes, the DPM is higher on the Smalland. Like, it is higher, but it's not insanely higher, right? It's only about 15%, something like that, 20% higher DPM. It's less than 20% higher for sure. Um, so nice, we got a flood. We did get quite fortunate there. We did get lucky, and we got a flood. But this guy clearly didn't have Hydron, and the thing is, like, or maybe he did, and he was just terrible. But like, really, okay, we can mention one more value Holland Torps have. If someone has Hydro up, you get a little bit of an advantage because of the torpedo speed, right? The torps are like 15% faster than most other torpedoes. So the reason why I'm gunning this guy is you saw that he used the damage control to put out the flood, and I'm pretty much guaranteed double fires because we saw earlier he didn't run fire prevention, right? So like, yeah, I'll probably die for this, but like, there's no universe that Holland DPM combined with a basically guaranteed double fire will not kill a Schlieffen at this range. So it's like, you might as well just get the damage, get the kill, and end the game now. Uh, love the guns on Holland. Like, I do. I just think the guns are quite good. I think the torps are fine. The problem is the hull. The problem is the boat. This, like, look at this, 15 fires. Hell yeah, dude. And we went 2 for 2 on floods. Hell yeah. I mean, German battleship. Is it really fair to compare? But it's the platform. The daring platform is not great either. The daring and the Holland, have the same concealment, right? Basically the same. Holland actually gets a bit more healing, but daring gets that British acceleration. So daring jukes shells so much better than Holland, despite not having the speed boost, because you can like guarantee juke by accelerating at almost any range in the daring, even like 9-10 kilometers battleship salvos. Like, you kind of tool along at quarter, half speed in daring. You get shot at, you hit the W key, and you just go from like 10 to 22 knots, like in the blink of an eye, right? Holland doesn't do that even with the speed boost up. So I do think that the legendary mod, yes, it's a 12% hit to your DPM, but one, it's making up for the fact that you cannot really afford Superintendent on gun spec Holland. If you want to maximize DPM, you have to make a choice: full DPM or an extra heal, right? So it's negating that problem entirely by giving you an extra heal. The extra healing percent is like, in my opinion, kind of a whatever ability. And the reason why I think it's like a whatever ability is, even if you have the 4 heals in Holland with the ledge mod and you don't run Superintendent, you still only have 16,000 HP of healing. So like, best case scenario, it's giving you the efficiency to heal an extra like 2,500 HP per game. I do think that 75% number is kind of pure bait unless you hit a torp. If you hit a torp in the Holland, then the ledge mod is like god tier, because you can spam through the heals and get like 75% of the torp damage back, right? That's the one situation where like the extra percentage is really, really cool. And then it does partially solve how hard you are to hit. I mean, listen, going 42.5, 43 knots in Holland with the speed boost up, does that like make you magically hard to hit? No. You're still, that, like, again, that's still putting you on par with like Regolo with the speed boost down. You're a little harder to hit than something like the Regolo because you're a bit smaller, but like, ultimately the problem is you're a target the size of daring with no British acceleration and no smoke. Like, that's the problem. That's the fundamental problem with the Holland. That's why it's just, to me, a very conflicting game design. The whole gimmick of the ship on paper is the torps, and I just think they're pure bait. I think the ship is the biggest build for torp bait in the entire fucking game. I really do. Very much like if you watch my Hayate video. I think Hayate is the most bait gun build ship in the whole game. Building the full guns and neglecting anything on the torps in Hayate is like turbo bait, turbo noob bait. And Holland's the exact opposite. Building for the torp reload, and the torp speed to like get you from a 7.8, 7.9 reaction time down to like a 7.2 reaction time by like taking 2-point captain skill and a torpedo spec mod, um, is just like, and to bring the torpedo DPM from like 64 to 70,000 torp DPM, like I don't know, man. That is crazy to me. That's actually crazy to me. It makes no sense. Like, uh, I don't know. I truly like. I love Torp spec Holland players. They're free kills. They're not really a torpedo threat. Um, like, dude, full reload build on that. We just looked at gearing. You could get, if you build gearing fully for torps, you get like 15-second longer reload than Torp spec Holland with the same reaction time, way more torpedo DPM, way more flood chance, and a smoke. You're smaller and harder to hit, a bit faster, and you lose the heal. I don't know, dude. The math is not mathing to me on this one. Um, so the boat is not bad. Like, this is the thing. When I say a boat is bad, you need to take this with like a bit of a grain of salt, because I'm saying it's bad compared to what I can play to do the same thing in, right? That is my ultimate problem with Holland. Is like, why am I playing the ship? I have to take range to get less range than the daring for the same DPM, the same fire starting, way less survivability, way less matchmaker resistance because I can't smoke up in Holland, way worse torps inside of 10 kilometers, and then admittedly, obviously, they're better outside because daring can't hit torps more than 10. Way worse AP, like you don't have the god tier daring AP. So like that's my, whenever I'm in the Holland, I'm just like, bro, I could be in the daring right now. I could be running fearless brawl spec on the daring, open water gunboating in the daring, and just do better. Like I would just be doing better in the daring. I could take Cunningham on the daring, so I have the same heals. Like what are we doing? Um, yeah, yeah. All right, let's hop back to the port. The yapping is getting out of control. Okay. Equipment first. As always, engine boost mod if you want to play Holland. And then everything else is kind of objectively correct, except the ledge mod on Holland is extremely good. It is undeniably extremely, extremely good. I don't really care for the Holland, so I personally don't value investing research points into that. But the ledge mod does kind of solve the main problem with Holland, which is its survivability is actually extremely shit. Despite the fact that you have OK HP and you get heals, the survivability, like we've mentioned multiple times, is actually quite dog shit because you're slow, so it solves the slow problem because you get like an extra, what is it, maybe 4 knots of speed. I don't even think it's that much, right? Isn't the legendary mod a 4% extra speed? Oh, you get an extra 8%. So yeah, yeah, you get about 3 more knots. And then most importantly, though, you don't have to take superintendent, which like you kind of can't afford, like I've stated multiple times. That's why we have 3 heals. So I actually do think the legendary mod on Holland is quite excellent. Um, it's like one of those things when we talk about good ledge mods. It's like, to me, a good ledge mod is on a boat that's worth playing for me, which the Holland isn't. Um, it's a legendary mod that is always a pure buff no matter what, which this isn't, because if you want Torp Spec Holland, then you can't run ledge mod. Um, and then 3, it's like really good in its own right. So like Gun Spec Holland, if you love Gun Spec Holland, then like this is a god tier ledge mod. Like I said, we're going Gun Spec on the captain. I just feel like the range is so limiting. There are just so many situations in the game where you have to shoot your guns, and the Holland is quite, again, we're talking like daring DPM, basically daring fire starting, um, okay shell arcs, like they're better than gearing or something, and this gives you 12-5 range. It just it makes you be able to have some game impact outside of torps. Um, Torpedo spec Holland. Really, I would kind of like not even bother with Swift Fish. I would pretty much, with Torp Spec Holland, legitimately the only thing I would do is just get rid of this for fill the tubes and liquidator because the flood chance is dog shit. Um, Like you can try to run Superintendent instead of Fearless Brawler, but like there's just so many situations in Holland where you're caught open water, you have to shoot your guns. Um, and like honestly, the torp damage output is actually so shit. Like I personally, like I've said, think Gunspec Holland is objectively the correct way to play the Holland because the torp output is actually so mediocre overall. You have really spammable torps though, so building into a bit of torpedo reload is actually pretty viable. Like you could maybe even say change Fearless Brawl for Fill the Tubes and Liquidator maybe, but it's very hard to run Superintendent on Holland. It's very difficult. You're very incentivized to do so, but then if you run Superintendent on Holland, you're giving up Fearless Brawler, and so you're definitely having shit guns or shit torps. You have to pick. Um, yeah, and then it's just the size of the boat. Like I said, that's why the ledge mod is so good because the boat is so easy to hit, so it partially solves that problem by giving you extra speed. And then because the boat is so easy to hit, you take so much damage, and then the ledge mod is giving you way more healing, right? And kind of making you like almost a bit of a cockroach. But to me, my issue with the Holland is I'd rather be in the daring. Like yeah, the Holland torps are more spammable. I understand that they're more likely to get a hit, right? But like I don't know, man. The Daring's base range, it's way more survivable because you have the smoke, you have a bit better fire starting, a bit better like better range without range mod than you do with Holland with taking AFT. Inside of 10 inside range, Holland's torps are dog shit. Like if these torps were 10-kilometer torps, with a community would like rightfully recognize them as some of the worst torpedoes in the game. Um, like we've gone over this in Gdansk. Gdansk's torps are like just better. Yeah, they only go 10 instead of 15, but like the Gdansk torps are just like inarguably better torpedoes for no reason. And the only value these things really have is the range. And like we've talked about reaction time, dude. Like we've talked about reaction time, but like tell me why these torps are better than Regolo or Alvaro de Bazan torps. Why are they better? Well, if people have Hydra up, like we've discussed, if people have Hydra up, you're more likely to hit a torp than any other torp because of the speed. But like, honestly, you could take, you could unironically take like torp spec Regolo, and you would have like 5-second reaction time torpedoes that go almost as far, hit for more damage, have higher flood chance, same better reload. Like, I don't know, dude. I don't know. Like it's 100-second reload. Like you could literally have better torps on the Regolo if you built for them, better torps on the Alvaro if you built for them. Truly, the sole value of the speed on these torps, the sole value of the speed on these torps is there are opportunistic torpedoes where you're like, especially sending them through gaps, and you have the speed to catch people. Like that is the sole value these torps have in my mind. Like I've said, the sole value they have is like this guy is crossing a gap and like 60, 70 knot torps just could never catch him before he can cross. And now because you have like 85 plus knot torps, you get to catch people. Like that's it. Um, but like I said, the boat has like very high like again anything with decent guns, okay survivability, and decent torps, like you're gonna do well in. I think we played like 5 or 6 games today. Um, yeah, we played a handful of games today. I think we're looking at like replays 4 and 5 or something. We had like a turbo blowout, turbo blowout, turbo blowout. I think that's why we're not looking at those three. Um, like it's not even that bad of a ship. I just don't value. Like to me, the sole thing, literally the only thing going for the Holland over something like Daring is the torpedoes and like I guess kind of the AA if the DFAA is up. If it's not, then it's like not even good. Um, and it's just like not that interesting. There's just too many situations where like people can just run at you, like fast cruisers, just run at you. You're not even a torp threat really. Torps aren't that stealthy. They don't do damage. Like you can't one shot any battleship really at all, even on like half HP. I don't know. It's just not that big of a fan. And I mean like obviously it's tragic because while I don't have Smalland, um, it's like Smalland gives up a tiny bit of torpedo power for like a way better boat. Yeah. Um, that'll do it. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.